So I read a statistic the other day, a couple months ago, that something like 50% of Americans are looking to change careers.
Wow.
Um, yeah. And well, it made sense to me. And then I started to think about how many times in my life I've changed careers. I don't know, 10, probably north of 10. So it is something that is on the mind of a lot of people, something I've done a lot. And I was thinking about, even though I've done it a lot, it is not easy. And I was thinking about it, why is it not easy? And I think we tend to think of like external answers, like I don't have the network or experience. I actually think the hardest thing is because we have to tell a different story to ourselves about who we are, right? We get used to seeing ourselves a certain way and we have to change that story. So I'm really excited today because my guest has made a significant career change. And I am so excited to hear from her about her inner process as well as how she did it. Her name is Laura Koulet. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It actually is a hard T, but I'm also known as Laura Koulet, so I
I,
wouldn't
I
say
was
it's
being
wrong.
French about it. I
So
was being
yeah,
French. So it's Laura Koulet.
yes.
Okay. Her name is Laura Koulet. And right now, Laura is a VP of legal at a huge global financial services, financial information company where she focuses on data privacy. But before she became a lawyer and got into the legal field, she actually built her career in technology as a product manager. And so I'm really excited to hear about that pretty significant change. With that, Laura, first of all, welcome to Reinventability. So happy you're here.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
No, I'm so excited for this conversation. So let's dive in. So you were in product management
Yeah.
and you had a pretty established career. You'd done it for a while. You were doing well. And then you went to law school.
Uh-huh.
How did that come about?
Yeah. How did that come about? So like I think the way a lot of things start, right? It's that little voice that sits in your head. And for me, it wasn't a voice of defeat. It wasn't a voice of sadness or feeling, lost. Like I was doing well in product management. And I actually still very much appreciate the role. You're a mini CEO, right? You have a lot of ownership over many different things. Um, but I felt, the voice that was talking to me was essentially like, you are not making the best use of your talents here.
Mm,
And I didn't know what that meant because what does that mean? I'm doing great by all objective measures. I had, a good social network. I loved the company I was at. I liked the work. Um, I had a nice lifestyle outside of work. Um, but that voice just kind of kept getting louder. And um, I knew I needed to make a change. I just didn't know what it was going to be. So I'm a very analytical person, and that is a great feature for a product manager. You want to think things through from a variety of angles. So I started really doing some homework of like, what is it that might be a better fit for me and my talents? And I didn't know. So I was like, I think it's grad school. I started exploring MBAs. I started exploring like marketing degrees, either like more specifically, or going through an MBA. And then I I had taken actually a couple classes, like night classes, just to experience it. And I was like, this doesn't quite feel right either. So I kept listening to that little voice and pulling on the thread of, does this feel good? Yes, no. Does this feel good? Yes, no. And I started realizing, mm, I think I need to be in a more, um, one analytical field that's like more singular. Because
mhm.
as a product manager, you're looking at 100 different things at all times. I wasn't particularly great at that. Um, I was good at it, but I didn't feel great about it. I didn't feel like I was doing what I was meant to be doing. Um, and I actually started taking personality and skills tests
Hmm.
that were less around, well, they were certainly around like what type of work, would you be good at? But then I started asking questions like, what kind of um, work environment, right, do I want to be in? What kind of money do I want to make?
Hmm.
And those were all questions that sort of start to narrow things fairly quickly when I was like, I want to be able to have more autonomy over my time. I want to be able to have large blocks of time that I can think through things. I want to be able to write written product, right? That's not a business, just a business case. I'd like to have the opportunity to make money if I wanted to. There's a lot of paths that you max out no matter which direction you go. So those are all things I started to think about. And I think I shadowed a few law school classes, talked to some attorneys, did that kind of homework. And then you start like LSAT prep and you really get into it. So
I
that's
love
how it
that,
all
Laura.
began.
I'm biting my tongue because I'm a master interrupter when I feel enthusiastic. But I want to pull on a couple threads of what you said. But I just want to tell you, like, you're doing a master class in reinvention. Like, so many of the things you said is like what I teach in my reinventability accelerator or when I
Yeah.
work with
Wow.
clients, right? So it's just really beautiful to like witness that. So a couple of things I want to pull on.
Yeah.
When you say you kept hearing that voice, it's funny. I literally just did a reel for Instagram, like an hour before you and I got on. I call it the tug. And
Mm-hmm.
it's this tug that I think we can all relate to that. It's this tug. Some people, in my case, I felt it kind of almost in my gut. I felt it for like 20 years and ignored it, by the way. So all power to you to listening. Some people hear it as a voice, but it's this tug that I interpret, like my sense of it. And I'd love to hear your reaction to this is like, that's your true authentic self, like trying to pull you into like, it's like you said, hey, you're not fully like actualizing all your gifts here. It's like pulling us into something. One of the places it was trying to pull me is to start painting. Like the art you see
Wow.
behind me is my art. I didn't start painting till I was 40 because I ignored that tug. Because what did painting have to do with being a tech CEO? Nothing. So I didn't do it. So I love that you were listening to it. And I just want to ask you, because I think a lot of listeners may have this question, like, when you started to hear that, I mean, it didn't say, like, that voice usually doesn't sound like anything. It doesn't say, hey, Laura, you should explore other places where your talents. How long did it take you to start paying attention? Like, what did it feel like? I'd love to hear a little bit more from you, especially like how long did it take you from like noticing to actually taking action?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if I'm being very truthful, I probably started hearing it like almost immediately after I graduated college and was in my first job, because you put so much work into college and getting to this place of your degree, you've picked your career, you're working, and then I was like, it's like wah wah wah. It was when it's like you feel like the sound effect. I was like, this is what it is. I
Yeah.
was like, dang, okay. I'm gonna give it a shot. And then I think like a year in, I was like, okay, I need to reevaluate like what's happening here. But then you kind of, it's fun. It's like the first time I've been truly independent. I'm living with friends in the city. Things are going great. But yeah, so I mean, it probably took me, gosh, I mean, I started law school in my mid 20s, mid to late 20s. So call it 5 years, 5, 6 years. That was a long
Yeah.
time.
No, well, I don't know. I think it was the right amount of time. I think in a way we kind of hear it when we're ready to hear it. Took me 20 or plus, so
Yeah,
I
that's
commend
fair.
you on
Yeah.
that. Um, the other thing that you said that I think is so important and so powerful is that when you started to test things out, which I think is such an important step, right? It's like we don't make a big leap. Like I hate when in our culture there's all these like, make a leap, just make a leap, it doesn't work usually like that, especially if you have like a mortgage or responsibilities or a
Yeah.
family. Like, and I love the way you sort of started to like shadow classes, like do some research. And then you said something really powerful, Laura. You said you would do things and you would ask yourself, does this feel good? I actually think like when I work with clients, because I work with mostly their leaders or entrepreneurs, and they're at a point of pivot. It might
Yeah.
be a different career, or it might be more in their current career. When I ask them this question, like, does this feel good? For many people, it's like, what? I don't know what you mean. Who cares? Like, it's the next logical thing in my career,
Right.
or it's the right thing to do. Like, we're so almost numb to the fact that like a work should feel good. So I'd love for you to talk about, like, as you were realizing that maybe the legal field is for you, did you have doubts? Did you have some like Was there another voice that was going, no, 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 don't do that. Don't do that. You're on
Oh,
this path. Do this path. Stay here.
absolutely. Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on everything you just talked about. Those are all really good points, and I think like actually very relevant to like the current day conversation. So so the logical piece, let's just talk about that for a minute. Um, that is what we're trained to do in school, right? We're school, society, however you want to say it. What intellectually is going to gain you X, and abandon the feelings that you have that have been, the experiences that your body can tell you that have been honed through millennia of right human, the evolution of life.
Exactly.
And those things, when they're in, synchronous, are good. You feel
Yeah.
intellectually good about it, and emotionally you're like, yeah, this feels good. Your body feels good. But yeah, when they're out of sync, the conventional wisdom, let's call it, or at least what our society has trained, is listen to the logic, to the reason, which
Yes.
in some cases is good. Like, don't go buy $100,000 vehicle if you don't have the money for it. Like,
That's
that's,
right.
even though it might feel good for a minute, like, that's good. But other things that are just much more qualitative, you need to do that. And actually, so the lead article in the Atlantic this month is how the Ivy League broke America, and it's by David Brooks. It's very interesting. It's not a novel idea, like, okay, the Ivy League has had a role in obviously our shaping of our intellectual norms and whatnot. But the point of the article really is, we have overemphasized intellectualism,
Yes.
right, as a skill set. And there's so much more to being a human and making good decisions and being mindful, considerate, compassionate, holistic, about the way that we approach society and make decisions about the society, besides like what marks that academia has trained us to get.
That's right.
So that's like
Well, let's
yeah,
talk about this because I actually
yeah,
think this is a huge point, and I love the points you've brought up. And I really relate to this personally. I grew up in Russia in a very wonderful and very intellectual family. Like my father is a double PhD scientist, my mother's a pianist, but very intellectual, and that was regarded beyond all. Like that,
yeah,
And I had no like all the words you just said were foreign to me, like awareness of the body, like none of this, like it just wasn't part of my being.
yeah,
And when I was 40, I suffered a really debilitating burnout, but I call it burnout, and I've written books about it, and I've been on 1,000 stages. But it was much more than that. It was that dissonance that you described, that I had been following the path of success, and on the outside, it was incredible. I mean, from a refugee to like tech CEO, New York Times, like every job you can imagine, taking care of my family, all this stuff. But internally, there was no alignment. But I had no vocabulary or not even a way to like I just assumed, oh, I'm just not doing enough things. That's why I'm unhappy. So I wonder if you would talk about and my going through that really awful time 9 years ago. I mean, I'm very grateful for that because that's when
yeah.
I started to understand that I'm not just the head on a thing.
Right.
I have a being. And actually now sometimes like I joke with my parents, I've left the family. I mean, we're still really close, but in a way that I actually trust my gut much more than like
Yeah.
the brain. So I'd love if you would talk a little bit about that. Did you just innately have this sense that, you have to listen to more than just the rational? Is it something you developed? Because I had to really learn it like,
Yeah.
like a baby.
Yeah. That is a great question, because I think I knew it for a long time.
Mhm.
And I think I came from a family that was very grounded and was able to help me kind of keep my bearings and be more, for lack of a, more precise word, like spiritual about like
Yeah.
decisions, have space and time to consider, do things feel good? Does that, really kind of mull it over? And time gives you that. That's the other thing too. In our society today, people want you to do things quickly, buy things quickly, move quickly, all these things. You don't have time for your body to process. Your process is, your body doesn't move at that level. But I do think, so I think I came back to that when I was making the career transition. But I do think like even in like my, current life, right? I'm a fairly new mom. I have a 2-year-old. Um, when I went through that transition, right, process of becoming a mother, I think that was like a reawakening of feeling the need to be grounded after, everything I've done in my career, which has been, you know, corporate, right? It's been very intellectually driven. Obviously, there's some like intuition that comes in there and being able to make decisions and recommendations and move quickly with the kind of beat of things. But I'd say I think I knew it when I like kind of up to a certain point. I do think at some point I did lose the thread a bit.
Hmm.
As we all do, right?
Yeah.
But then yeah, I think I had to be reminded of how to go back to the body. And I'll give credit to my wonderful therapist, Mary Sanker. She really was like always asking, when I was like, I'm feeling so much anxiety about being a mom. Am I doing it right? I'm working full time, all these things. And she's like, well, just like, how does it feel? I'm like, oh yeah, that
Right.
question. How does it feel?
Right. There's that question.
There's
Yeah.
that question. And I'm like, I used to do that. And yeah, to your point, like you lose it, you have to relearn it. Um, so I think it's a practice for sure. I mean, this is why when, you think about, how, meditation has become like more mainstream. That was something that actually I would do with my family when I was very young. My dad had kind of always had like a spiritual component that, even if it was very brief, he'd be like, go sit quietly. Even if he didn't call it meditation, that's what he was doing. Go
Hmm.
meditate on it for a
Hmm.
minute. So I have a very strong base to go back to, but the world, right, kind of
Takes over.
takes over and puts you into, a bunch of different threads that, you kind of have to redo your quilt at some point.
I think that's actually, it's a really beautiful way to say that, because I've come to believe that we all of us, it's an innate ability that we all have to sense ourselves. Like we all have a body, so we can all tune into that intelligence. So I love that actually visual, like we have all these threads, we just need to bring them together. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, I mean, I teach this for a living, for better or worse. Like when I start working with a mentorship client, they often tell me like, wow, now I understand why you don't call yourself an executive coach. Because people ask me, are you I said, no, I'm not an executive coach. I'm not going to sit and linearly discuss with you career stuff. We start doing things like this because that's how you like become who you are. And it's these wonderful moments when people, as you said, they just sort of reconnect to that ability in themselves. They're like, oh, yeah, it's there. I can do it. But then to your point, and I haven't read that article by David Brooks, I'll have to
Yeah.
read it. I think we live in a world, as you said, where it's kind of like it's woo-woo to listen to your body, but it's the right thing to do the logical thing, which is kind of hilarious if you go back 5,000 years to like the Vedas in India or the Buddhists, the Chinese, the Qigong, it's like, well, no, actually, it's kind of woo-woo to not listen to your body,
Right.
right? I mean, we have more neurons in our gut than in our brain. Right. There's more neural pathways going from the heart to the brain, from the brain to the heart. So like,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
always feel like modern science is uncovering what, as you said, like has been for thousands of
Right.
years. So it's like almost individually, we have to reconnect to that. And also just as a world, as a society, we have to like remember that in a way.
Exactly. Make space for it again. And like, by all means, I'm in an intellectual field and I love like intellectual rigor and appreciate being around people who have a lot of intellectual horsepower. Like all of those things are energizing and amazing to me, like that, developments that we've had in so many different fields. But it is because of, right, the base of like who humans are, that we do need to make sure continue to be incorporated to really, perform at our best and be our best selves. Because otherwise you're just, an unhinged computer.
That's a good way to
You
put
know?
it. No, that's a great way to put it. And I'm with you. The brain is incredibly useful and it's
Yeah.
amazing what it can do. And, I love like intellectual conversations or learning things. I mean, that's like my drug in a way, like learning new things. So it's not that we're saying don't use your brain. It's use that whole other part of your
Yeah.
being that we've been taught, as you said, to kind of not pay attention to, because that's when to me, that's, this word alignment gets tossed around a lot. That's, I think, what I've come to think of it as, is when we're aligned with who we are. And that
Yes.
means our brain, our being, our body, our soul, like we're in alignment. And so I think it's that. So I want to go back to what you were talking
Yes.
about. So you know, when you started to test things out, which I think is such a great reminder that you don't need to leap. Actually, you
Right.
don't know what you're leaping into, because you said something. I'd love for you to talk about this. You know, a lot of people that I work with, when we start working together, they know they need to make a change, but they don't know what it is. And that can be really scary. So the question that we got off on this very important tangent, but I asked you if you had doubts, right?
Yes.
Because you had this kind of great path. So were there other voices going, no, 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 Laura, don't do that. Stay right here.
Yes.
This is fantastic. This is
Well,
great. Do this.
it's a great question. And yes, I had significant doubts, both internally and then from like close advisors, um, mainly like my parents and good friends, my family. So this is where I think also it gets interesting when you think about making a career transition. So I had huge doubts. It was 2008. The economy was in a free fall. I have a great career. I'm doing well. No, I'm not. My job's not in jeopardy. I'm financially independent for the first time in my life. You know, a few years out. Do I really want to give this up? Like, do I want to give up my seat? Also
Mm.
on, you know, I wouldn't call it a rocket ship, but it was, you know, it was a tech company doing great. And so that voice was very strong. It was like, don't misstep off of this. Not many people get this opportunity, but I still had that voice saying, but this isn't it for you. And this is where I made the decision to test myself and say, you're not confident enough to make the leap, but you know, it's not the leap that this isn't the path that you need to be on. And so I said, I will go to night school. I will do school part-time and see how it goes for like first semester, 1 year, and see what happens. And so that was me saying, because you're not confident, you're going to work harder to get to that decision. Now, I cannot say that I recommend that for everybody, because
Mm.
it takes a very particular type of person that I think can mentally withstand that kind of time
Rigor.
constraint.
Yeah, rigor.
Yes, whatever term you want to give it. But I did that all because I had really strong doubts.
Mm.
And I wasn't, and also too, at that time, a lot of not research, but stats were coming out about the legal profession, both, rapidly changing salaries, opportunities, not what they used to be. And, I also looked at that, right? I was said, these are real statistics. Like
Hmm.
I need to be like mindful of that. So I did both. And my first year went well. I had a supportive employer. I was doing well in law school. Did really well in my legal writing and speaking classes. Honestly, won awards actually. No,
Amazing.
and so I was like, okay, I can do this. So then I kept on that train. And what that did, despite the realities of what that brings around, how much you're working, it dual tracked my career, right? So I was like working as a product manager, doing really well, but then also putting a significant investment into my education and a pathway that I hoped would one day bring me to the other side that my little voice had inside my head had been talking about. So that was my response to those doubts.
Mm.
Some of it though being, very logical, practical, calculated
Sure.
cost of law school, risk of, income loss, etc., against, again, the economy being in a free fall and just going to school full time. So I also had in addition to that, I had opportunities to work inside our general counsel's office at the company I was at as a clerk, right? Well, call myself a clerk. I mean, I was doing work here and there, kind of spotty in the beginning, and then it kind of grew as I became a little bit more skilled. So there was a lot of opportunity for on-ramping to my envisioned profession. So that's how I hedged against those doubts. That might look a different way for obviously many different
Well,
people, but that's a way to do it.
I think I think it's really important what you're saying. And I love this thread that we're weaving in this conversation between being logical and hedging your bets and like figuring out what the risk is and how you need to mitigate it to be comfortable,
Yeah.
and feeling into it and being truthful with yourself inside. I think it's such a beautiful, like, illustration of that. And, you know, it's interesting. Whenever we do anything new, we have doubt, right? I mean, I study neuroscience. You know, for the brain, it doesn't want to handle change because change is,
Right.
one, uncertain. We could die. That's how the brain interprets change. And second, it's very expensive. Any change requires a lot new skills, a lot of new learning. The brain wants to preserve its energy. It doesn't want us to do that. And so, you know, when you talk about that, you did something really challenging. You went to night school. But I actually think that makes so much sense because, you know, there's no amount of affirmations that we can say to ourselves to eliminate the doubt. The
Yeah.
brain is really smart. And so in a way, like, you talked back to your brain and you said, listen, I understand. We're afraid. This could not work. Let me do it this way. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, Laura, for everyone who's listening, and that when we want to make a significant change, whether it's on our career or our lives, that is going to require us to do some challenging things, right?
Yes.
And like, let's just say it, right? Like,
Yep.
there's no such thing as leap and you'll land. That's why I don't love that analogy. Because,
Yeah.
you know, even to leap, we require, like, you got to run back. You got to really, like, have the power in your legs. So I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I have never quite called it wisdom, but I appreciate that term. In my house with my husband and I, like, we have a phrase where, you know, we might be talking about somebody that's making either a transition or trying something new. And we will kind of evaluate the stage of that it's at. And we'll always say, you know, this is the hustle time, which, you know, it's that at some point when you look at a lot of people's success, like, at some point someone did some real heavy lifting for not just 6 months, right? Years. Like, we're talking,
Yes.
like, you know, 2 to 5 year, usually more like 3 to 5 year hustle, to kind of make that springboard yourself kind of where you want to be. And so that was my time to hustle in life. That was the choice that I made, and I kept on it. And it was not easy for sure, but that's also another doubt that when I talk to people, because a lot of people be like, "Oh, I'd love to go to law school. I'd love to chat with you." You know, and I think some people aren't afraid to work hard. They know that they can because they've had experiences, but a lot of people are afraid to test themselves. I certainly was. I was like, can I do this kind of workload?
Hmm.
Um, and that, you know, that's why I made a 1 year commitment to myself. And then I was like, I can do it. Like, let's keep doing it. Now by year 4, that's what part-time law school looks like. You're in 4 year. I was like, this needs to end.
Yeah, I'm done.
But the finish line was right there. So I said, I can see it. You know, it's like that marathon,
Yeah.
you know, your mile, you know, 23. Yeah, like 3 more miles, you can do it.
Yeah. But I
Not that
think
I've
it
run a
was
marathon.
also, that was like a really smart thing to do, is to say, let me try this for 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Because that makes it, even though it's challenging, it makes it doable for our brain to say, I'm just going to give this a shot for 1 year, right? And then when you can do it for 1 year, your brain will say, okay, well, you can do it for 1 year, you can do it for 2. So I think
Yeah.
breaking it down into something smaller is also great. But I just want to pause just for a moment because I think it's, and I haven't, like, had a conversation on this podcast that illuminated this so much, that any significant, meaningful change is going to require some challenging work.
Yeah.
Like, there is no other way to do it. And I think it's so important to just acknowledge it. Like, as I'm thinking, you know, because I went from being in tech for 20 years and a tech CEO into being an author and a speaker and a leadership mentor. And like, when I say it in a sentence like that, it's like, oh, I just changed. I went from this to,
Right.
no, that
No.
was very, very hard. And I had to do a lot of work. Like, I had to work for years on my book, and then I had to work for, right? So I think it's so important to acknowledge that. And the analogy that's in my head that I just want to share, and this is where my father, the physicist, is speaking through me, you know, for a spaceship, when the spaceship goes into orbit, the hardest thing for it to do, it has to escape gravity. It has to reach what's called escape velocity. It has to really escape the Earth's gravity to go into orbit. That's the greatest energy expenditure. So like that, when the spaceship is taking off, you know how we see that like fire, and it's like, that's incredible amount of
Mhm.
energy to help it escape the pull of gravity. And this is how I think of you making this change, of making any significant change. The gravity is the way, your current career, your current path, our current life, it has a really strong pull. There's
Yep.
comfort in it, familiarity. You said you're parents and your friends weren't really into it. Often when we want to make a significant change, I find the people closest to us are like, wait, don't do it,
Yeah,
because they have fear for us. So
absolutely.
that's the gravitational pull of our current path. In order to go into a different orbit, we have to gather all that energy. That's the work. Like, that's the really hard work. So that's just the analogy that
I
I
love that
keep thinking about
analogy.
that. And as you talked about, it's like exactly
Yeah.
that.
It's
He-
so true, like, get the thrusters going, like and it does, it takes an enormous amount of energy and, you've gotta feed that engine, like, it's yeah, there is, unfortunately, I think social media and other, images that we see make things they skip over that are like, there's you see a little teeny part of it, but it's like, no, like, it's actually that's a big part of it, and then you kinda end up here.
that's right.
Um, yeah, because
That's
it's not
right.
it's not super glamorous to, have your head down and working through things that are
No, but
tough.
I think I think that's the price we have to pay for like living a life that's very fulfilling. And I think
Yeah.
it's a pretty fair price. Do you like being a lawyer? So when you switched, was it immediately like, oh, I really love doing this?
So, great question. So, my first job as an attorney was at a law firm, and coming from tech and coming from being a product manager, it was a stunning change for me in terms of what type of work is rewarded, right? In tech, efficiency, innovation, collaboration, those are all really rewarded attributes.
Yes.
At a law firm, it was hours filled. That's what's rewarded. And good work, you need to do good work in those
Yeah.
hours. You can't just like, kind of perform poorly and, give out subpar work product. But that was really a change that because very clear to me very quickly. Um, I was just built different than your, traditional law firm model as an associate sitting in a law firm model that way. And so this is where like the kind of escaping gravity helps that I had dual tracked this kind of career because very shortly into my private practice career, a former colleague had reached out to me and was essentially like, I didn't realize you're an attorney now. We need someone that understands the business. You're very, I love working with you. You're very efficient, hardworking. Will you come do contracts for us? Like essentially. And I was like, well, okay. And that was another thing where people are like, you're leaving private practice so soon. You learned so much at law firms. And I totally understood that. But I knew like much more strongly at that point. I was like, I belong in an area where I can put again all the skills that I just, I put my thrusters on for that I can
Yep.
use all of them. And that's the other thing too. I was had we already been working in data privacy at the tech company as a product manager, integrating features into the, design development, working with our general counsel's office on issues around data privacy, data collection, all those things that, at a law firm, you're kind of put on whatever the partner needs you to be
Yes.
working on. So I kind of knew I'm like, I have this like real good knowledge that's not totally being
Hmm.
utilized, which is okay. I would have stayed, honestly, if this opportunity had come up. But when it came up, because I'd already done all that work, I said, okay, I'm gonna go try this out. And yeah, it worked out well. I did well. And then I basically grew myself into the general counsel position over a course of several years, which, is another very unique path that's was really scary because I had something I hadn't done before, but I had great, again, advisors, external advisors, law, at law firms or outside counsel, it really coached me through a lot of hard issues. And then you integrate that and you learn and you work on an executive team. And yeah. And then, we kind of built the business to where it was, well, a very a company that was attractive to a target, um, or, to target but from an acquirer. So it was yeah, it was a very unexpected journey, I'll say
Hmm.
that. But I do very much like the work that I do because it's a lot of application of my skills inside the business context, but then I have the piece where I can think through risk from a variety of different angles and give recommendations, risk assessments, um, and yeah, work to, you know, be both kind of like an analyst advisor, but then also still sit within the business making process that moves at a particular speed that was very well trained in for
Yeah.
product management. So I have also had a very non-traditional legal path as well. But I will say, to talk about getting out of escaping orbit, there was one other major thing that kind of also happened that I had to, get myself free of. So after I got into law school, I know I'd been working, again as a product manager. I had been doing a lot of good work, and I got a very attractive offer from a very well-known Seattle-based tech company that was like, "We're doing the full relo." I was like, "Wow, this is incredible." I had just taken the bar. So I didn't, I had kind of completed all my law school training and my credentialing.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, it must have been about a year later, actually. And I thought to myself, well, I should do this. This is a great opportunity
Yeah.
to work for this famous company that's doing incredible things. I accepted the job, and then that voice came back. What are you doing? You just put 4 years into this. You know, are you going to make the transition? And that was probably one of the hardest decisions that I made, was like,
Mm.
you know what? I'm actually going to give that opportunity up to go actually work in law. And there were a couple other, steps in between there, but that was really
That
like
was like,
another moment. Yeah.
this isn't a concept that I've come up with, but, um, a lot of the spiritual teachers that I consider my teachers from reading, studying, they talk about then when we make a decision, the universe will test us to make sure we really mean it.
Wow.
And when I say the universe, just for listeners and for you, to me, there's no separation between ourselves and the universe. So it's not some woo woo. It's like us, the greater us, will test, will make sure, do you really mean this? And I've actually observed this so much when I look back through that lens on my path, when I'd make a change and I'd make a commitment and I'm working towards it, something would come out of left field or from my like previous path that would be very shiny. And it's almost like your true self is going, Laura, are you sure? And
Yeah.
it's like this really, and I'm not sure there's a wrong or a right path. It's more, can you be
Yeah.
honest with what you really want? So I really love that because
Yeah. It was an acute test, that is for sure, that
yeah,
I was tempted by. But again, time came to my rescue because of the relocation. I had 60 days or something to
yeah,
relocate.
yeah.
And that's when I started to sink into it and was able to feel myself feel tense about it.
Mm. That's I use the feelings, the kind of two modes that I think we're either in expansion or contraction.
Yes.
And so I started this just like for myself, like, is this when I'm thinking about this or working on this, do I feel expansive? Like it can be really hard, but I feel expansive, or do I feel like constricted? So contracting. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like tension, or do you feel an openness, right? It's almost like our true self is trying to guide us. It can't always
Yes.
talk to us. It's like,
I know.
it's either open to this or closed to it.
And
I
that's
really love
listening.
that, Laura. Wow. It's so, what a great journey. I'm learning a ton. I think it's so, and I love how, just the way that you're so aware and open about all the different like internal experiences you had and then external steps. And I think that's the combination. We can't think ourselves into a significant change in life. Like it
No.
doesn't matter how long we think about it. Clarity emerges through action combined with like feeling how we're feeling. So I really love that because you felt it, you thought about it, and then you did things and
Yeah.
some difficult things. And
Exactly. Yeah.
I think
The
that's just a
feeling.
beautiful example. Last question, I
Yeah.
always like to ask this, someone's listening to this and they're really inspired by what you did and they feel like they hear that voice that they need a change, but they don't have an inkling like you did that maybe it's legal, maybe it's something like that. What would you say like to someone like that?
Yeah. I think really just starting to take notice and stock of things that you enjoy, that you notice about other people's lives that you like, right? Start by, I think it's ultimately start by listening to yourself, right? Understanding yourself. People say understanding yourself, but it's also like, if you kind of think about the relationship with yourself being like the most important one that you have in your entire life. Yeah, listening to yourself. What is it, that is giving you that feeling that you don't like? Is it your work environment? Is it that you like working independently? Is it that you don't like finance and you're, you know, in accounting? Just listening to those things. And once you just identify one thing, just try something that's different from it. Just kind of t-shirt, you go on, people go in, you try on clothes, you order things online, try on things. It's essentially that.
Mm.
It's like, um, action brings a lot of insight. And that, I think, comes to that mind body connection again of like feeling things how they feel, trying them out, talking to people, seeing how people in other professions make you feel when they're talking about their lives, what they're
Mm.
working on. Um, if you don't have time to necessarily start it right away, just start by having conversations. I think I see a lot of people that just get stuck in, you know, and that's the thing. There's so many options in today's world that you can intellectualize and create hypotheticals.
Overthinking paralysis is what I
Oh,
call
yeah,
it. Yeah.
paralysis analysis. So just start doing something that's a
Mm.
little bit different from what you're doing today. And if it's like you've always been interested in working in a coffee shop, you know, maybe you pick up a shift, just sign up to do, I don't know, work in a coffee shop
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
one day a week, one evening a week, one morning a week if you have time. Anything that can give you insight as to how the experience really is versus your perception of it. And that's
Mm.
the other thing too, the dissonance between perception and reality. Until you're sitting in someone else's shoes, you just never know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really powerful. Thank you for that. And last thing you just made me think of that I just want to share with you. I think you'll enjoy it. So when I was in college, so we came here as refugees when I was in 8th grade. So by the time I was in college, I'd only been in the country for 5 years. So I was still like, I
Incredible.
don't know how life works.
Yeah.
So, but I started telling everyone I was going to be a lawyer because it sounded really good. And my parents were happy. And it's like, that's smart. That's great. And I was majoring in this like triple major of like that a lot of pre-law kids did. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I had no idea what that meant and didn't really want it. It just sounded good. And I had after my freshman year of college, I had an internship with the Lawyers Committee for Human Rights in New York City. And I think they're still around. They do really like meaningful work. They go, when someone is applying for asylum in the United States, like in a legal process, they go and basically top lawyers from top law firms volunteer to assist them in that process because people have no money. And so because of my refugee experience, I really enjoyed it. And so every day I was like alongside these top attorneys from top New York firms. And literally every single person I worked with would tell me, do not become a lawyer. And they were like, do not become a lawyer. Like, I hate my life. Don't become a lawyer. And I don't know if it was just the selection, this was New York, very intense. But I remember I was like, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
They're just like, their best part of their day was when they were doing the volunteer stuff. And I just want to share this with you. And
Yep.
I never wanted to be a lawyer. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
even something that dissuaded me. Like eventually I just was like, wait, I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm going to do
Yep.
something else. But it's just, I think it speaks to like, for you, you found a legal career path that really aligns with you. And I also just love like your multiple abilities, including like what you learn in product management. It might align with you. It might not align with someone
Yes.
else. Like
Yep.
they hated being lawyers. You love being a lawyer. And so I just think it's this like great reminder, and everything you've been sharing. Like that's what I'm taking away is we don't know. We have to test it out. And also like the big thing, Laura, I'm taking away from our conversation, and I hope the listeners are, there isn't one path. Like this is the path to becoming a lawyer. Like there's many, like you've carved out this, as you said, unique path and a unique combination. I think that's also very freeing to not think there's only one path and I'm supposed to find it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say those words have come out of my mouth before. People have been like, don't be a lawyer. And what it might be my perception of them, or it might have been a point earlier in my life where I was just like, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Laura, thank you so much. I'm so like really deeply grateful for your insights and honesty. and wisdom. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
taking the
much. It's
time to
been
do
great
this.
being
And
here. I love the conversation and about, some of your experiences are incredible too. I'd love to learn more.
yeah, no, let's connect for sure offline. I'd love to meet you. Laura's due with her baby in a month, so maybe after that, I'd love to meet you in person. And as always, thank you to you listening. If I'm in your ear, for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm really grateful for having a piece of your heart and mind every week. That's all we have for this week, and I look forward to seeing or being in your ear for our next episode next week.